The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
A warm good morning to all of you. On behalf of our embassy, I convey a warm welcome to this webinar focusing on this important topic of Indian renewable energy. The government of India has set a target of installing 175 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity by the year 2022, which includes 100 gigawatts of solar, 60 gigawatts of wind, and 10 gigawatts of biopower. This itself, my friends, speaks of the quantum of opportunities for foreign investors in India's RE space. The expert speakers whom we have today in this webinar would be dwelling deeper into these topics. Since as COVID-19 is spreading across India, we from the embassy are fully aware and recognize that the business activities are highly impacted. There are issues related to travel, visa restrictions, employment restrictions like workplace policies, containment measures, forced lockdowns, etc. Some of the information is available on the website on these topics of our embassy. Friends, even in these testing times, German companies continue to see an increasing interest in India. To convert this intent into actual investment, by facilitating and assisting the entry of these companies into the Indian market, we from the Embassy of India, Berlin, has initiated a dedicated and strategic program in 2015 called the Make in India Megatrends. The program is otherwise called the India's Red Carpet for German Megatrends. So let me just briefly walk you through this program, just for those friends who are not aware of its details. The MIIM program is supported by a network of competent partners. It is a unique integrated platform for market entry services that combines services rendered by government as well as not-for-profit and private entities. You will see on the screen the list of MIIM program partners who offer various services. For example, in the fields of investment consulting, tax and legal, financial services, and project financing for market entry, expansion, and feasibility studies. This MIIM program provides a whole range of free of cost benefits through special workshops, networking, information exchange events, etc. Additionally, the Invest India, which is the official government agency for investment promotion, and many Indian state governments are also program partners to assist with regulations and permission issues to facilitate German investments in our country. So friends, how does the MIIM precisely help the German Mittelstand? The MIIM team helps address queries, both general and specific, through its hotline and email. Companies can send their queries to the MIIM email address, which is miim@indianembassy.de, and have them answered by the MIIM project team and relevant program partners. Commonly received queries include clarifications on strategic topics such as market assessment, go-to-market strategy, partner identification, financing, etc., as well as on operational topics such as licensing, tax, legal incorporation, location search, etc. If a company is interested in becoming an MIIM member company, our MIIM project team has a detailed discussion on the company's India investment plans and support requirements. Based on the discussions between the two and fulfillment of certain criteria, the company gets enrolled as a member company into the program. Now secondly, the support is also through various regular complementary workshops and webinars, such as the one we have today, which help provide insight into issues important for investment decisions in India. Since September 2015, that is since the launch of the program, more than 100 common and customized workshops and webinars have been conducted on topics requested by MIIM companies. Also, MIIM provides channels for networking and liaising between MIIM companies and stakeholders such as policymakers and business associations. The program has entered into its fifth year in September 2019. The program is currently supporting 138 Mittelstand companies in Germany and facilitating a declared investment of euro 1.2 billion. Under the MIIM program, our team will be happy to continue its support to more German Mittelstand companies which are interested to do business in India. Let me make it very short and brief and give most the time for the expert speakers whom we have today. And let me conclude by just wishing you all the best and friends, most importantly, stay safe and healthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whittle, for your presentation.
And please, you can pass on to the next speaker today. Thank you.
Yeah. So we are moving to the next presentation to EAC Euro-Asia Consulting, Mr. Anup Barapatre, a senior managing consultant for the renewable industry overview. Anup, you have to unmute yourself and start the presentation.
Thank you, Ketan. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Anup Barapatre, Managing Consultant at EAC Euro-Asia Consulting Private Limited, and I'm based out of Mumbai. I basically head the energy practice here in Mumbai. And firstly, I'd like to thank you for joining this webinar today. So I will be today taking you through the India renewable energy opportunities that we've been able to identify through our research work. And so I'll quickly take you through the agenda. So the agenda for the discussion today, we will start off the discussion with talking about what is the need for renewable energy and what are the megatrends in India. Then I will take you through the renewable energy sector opportunities, which will include the wind energy sector and the solar energy sector. And this will then be followed by my colleague Abhishek, who will take us through the session on India alternate fuels landscape and opportunities, which will then focus on biofuels and hydrogen and fuel cells. So why renewable energy? We are looking at carbon dioxide emissions and coal imports here. So basically, the coal imports have grown by about 5% in the last 5 to 6 years timeline, and this is one of the most dirtiest fuel, if I can say so. That one of the most dirtiest fuel to use, and largely this is driven by a large part of this is from the electricity sector, which is about 65%. We are globally the second largest consumer of coal. From an emissions perspective, further 7% of the global CO2 emissions is here from India, and more than 40% of this is contributed. The CO2 emissions is contributed from the electricity sector. Secondly, coal imports. While India has a substantial amount of coal reserves, we continue to import coal. Also for the electricity sector, we are the second largest importer of coal globally. and about 9 to 11% of the coal-fired power plants in India run on imported coal. The coal imports have also grown over the past 5 years at about 2% CAGR. So, this is some factors which we've looked at, of what is going to drive renewable energy forward. Going to the next slide. Secondly, there is significant amount of renewable energy potential in India. I mean, the total renewable energy potential in India stands at about 1.1 terawatts, or 1,100 gigawatts, wherein the top 5 states constitute 75%. So largely, it is very concentrated in the top 8 states here. The renewable energy potential, the wind energy potential is 300 gigawatts for India, whereas the solar energy potential is about 750 gigawatts. And biofuels and small hydro is then 25 and 20 gigawatts in all. So if I look at the top 5 states for wind, they constitute about 87% of the total wind potential, India wind potential, and the top 5 states on the solar side constitute about 56% of the wind potential, of the solar potential. Sorry for that. In India. Going forward, we also looked at how India compares in terms of the installed capacity against some global economies, wherein we looked at Europe, we looked at US, and then we looked at a few leading economies in the Asia region as well. So India, from a capacity installation perspective, is the 4th largest globally, and from a renewable energy perspective also is the 4th largest. But when we compare it as a share of the total installed capacity mix, India is at about 24%, which is still higher than compared to the likes of the US or other Asian economies. But when we compare it to Europe, where largely renewables have taken a significant stride ahead, we see that India lags behind. Say, for example, Germany, we have 55% of renewable energy capacity, whereas in UK we have 42% of renewable energy capacity. So looking at all of this, and there is this is basically driving the government to push for RE capacity augmentation, considering that India is targeting 40% of non-fossil fuel capacity by 2030. Going further, we look at the key takeaways. So from the slides above, so we've looked at perspectives that are driving renewable energy, as well as alternate fuels here. So rising emission, air pollution concerns, basically from a CO2 perspective, which is preliminary or primarily driven by the power sector, needs a push from renewable energy as well as alternate fuel technologies. Import dependency for fossil fuels. So while we look at import dependency from a coal perspective, we saw that it's been growing at about 2%, and India is again targeting to have zero dependence on coal imports by about 2024-25, which is a driving focus again for renewable capacity addition. Also, alternate fuels are being considered from a reduction of fossil fuel imports perspective. Mainly crude oil, wherein India again is amongst the top 5 importers globally. Significant renewable energy potential, like we saw, I mean, there is about 1,100 gigawatts of potential in India, of which roughly about 1,050 gigawatts is from solar and wind, which is then going to be the driving force for renewable energy penetration in India. Quickly looking at what the sustainable megatrends, the energy sector megatrends are from a sustainability perspective in India. So we've identified innovation to zero as one of the megatrend, connected systems is another, advanced technologies, distributed generation, and then new business models. So while we look at renewable energy, we're talking of, innovation to zero, we're talking about renewable energy integration, wherein you have zero emissions, efficiency improvement and emission controls for the existing thermal power plants. Connected systems, we're talking about Internet of Things, big data analytics, smart grids, artificial intelligence coming into play now. Advanced technology, we're looking at offshore, floating solar, energy storage, as well as alternate fuels. Distributed generation again includes some bit of alternate fuels, and then small off-grid solar installations as well. And then new business models wherein companies are now looking at asset-light models, looking at O&M outsourcing and blockchain. So the presentation today that we would be going through is going to focus on the renewable energy integration part of it and alternate fuels. So now we will into the renewable energy sector opportunities, wherein we will further look into wind and solar energy sector. India renewable energy targets. So from a solar perspective, today the installed capacity as in of March 2020 was about 35 gigawatts. The target by 2022 that was set is 100 gigawatts, and the FY30 target, which is again in line with the Paris Agreement of 40%, non-fossil fuel power, which is submitted in the intended nationally determined contributions. So in line with that, India has set up a target of about 300 gigawatts from solar power in FY30. Whereas for wind, the targets, currently we are at about 38 gigawatts in FY20, that is March 2020. And this is expected, the target set for 2022 is 60 gigawatts and 140 gigawatts for 2030. From a small hydro perspective, we have we stand at about 5 gigawatts, and there are no capacity additions that the government is targeting from both small hydro as well as biopower perspective. So India is expected to surpass the 40% non-fossil fuel power capacity by 2030, based on the submitted, which is as part of the submission made to for intended nationally determined contributions. Here the focus again will be on solar and wind portfolio expansion, considering the competitive prices and the developed ecosystem that India has been able to develop. The key growth enablers for the renewable energy segment in India. So basically, the government is keen on, like we talked about earlier, the government is keen on pushing renewable energy in India, and so there are certain policy initiatives and enablers that the government has brought in to accelerate capacity augmentation on the renewable energy side. A few of these is what we have listed out here. So one is the green energy corridor, wherein the government is setting up a 9,400 kilometer transmission line along with a 19 GVA dedicated evacuation, a substation, which is like a dedicated evacuation infrastructure for 20 gigawatts of renewable energy. This is from the target. The focus here is basically seamless integration of large-scale renewable energy into the grid. RPOs or renewable purchase obligations. So the target RPOs for 2021 and 2022 respectively, from a solar perspective, is 9.75% and 10.5% in 2022, while for non-solar it is 10.25% and 10.5%. With RPO, we mean here is that in the DISCOMs will be mandated to at least procure this much. In their electricity mix, they should have at least 9.75% of solar capacity and 10.25% of non-solar renewable capacity in FY21. Next, we are looking at from a perspective of renewable energy management centers. So this is basically an AI-based or artificial intelligence-based RE forecasting and scheduling tools that provide the grid or the load dispatch centers with greater visibility of the kind of the production that is going to happen from all the grid connected renewable energy power. This is basically to ensure that the master plan status for RE projects is maintained, and the communication can accordingly flow to the conventional power plants to basically ramp up or ramp down their capacities based on how the renewable energy is going to deliver over time. Round the clock power, this is a first of a kind reverse bundling RE project that SECI is basically tendering, wherein the focus is on new capacity build up for RE power, and this will be coupled with existing thermal power. So the idea is to have sustainable and continuous power supply in this situation. The only caveat here is that uh, over the years period, minimum 51% should be generated from RE. Then we're looking at FDI. I mean, India is focused on 100% FDI under the automatic route for projects of renewable power generation as well as component manufacturing. This is basically from building the India competence for renewable energy and localization push. So where basically there are plans to raise the tariffs for imports of green energy equipment. Besides, manufacturing linked tenders are set for setting up domestic manufacturing capacity. This is from a perspective of building the local value addition in India. Going further, we will now look into the wind energy sector details. Just a quick recap on how the wind energy or the wind sector has developed over the past 3 to 5 years timeline. So in March 2014, the capacity stood at about 21 gigawatts, whereas this has expanded to roughly 38 gigawatts in March 2020. While we look at the tariff policies that were prevalent until 2017, FY 2017 was a feed-in tariff regime, and this was then changed to auctions with reverse bidding. So the idea here was to reduce the tariff subsidies in light of the following prices and increase the competitiveness in line with the solar business. So the capacity additions that happened between FY15 to FY17 were 11.2 gigawatts, whereas what has happened during the period of reverse bidding has been 5.4 gigawatts. This is largely due to the transition phase and is expected to improve going forward. Additionally, there are about 9 gigawatts of wind power projects which are under implementation, about 3.7 gigawatts which is under planning or bidding stages. So we will quickly try and understand it more in detail on what tariff, what has been the impact of the change from the feed-in tariffs to the reverse bidding. So the reverse bidding basically was introduced in 2017, like we mentioned earlier. In January 2017 is when it was introduced. And earlier to that, the feed-in tariffs were the generation-based incentives. The cost of wind power procurement was somewhere about 5.6 euro cents per unit. This significantly dropped to an average of about 3.4 to 3.6 unit, and 3.5 roughly units, which is about negative 40%. I mean a 40% drop from what it was in the earlier regime of the feed-in tariff system. So there is definitely a good amount of gain that the government has made, and they've been able to build in competitiveness in this segment through the new mechanism of reverse bidding. Besides, they've been able to bring in a lot of transparency into the entire system of what's going to come in the future. Three growth drivers and challenges in the wind industry. Like we talked earlier as well, we'll firstly look at what the growth enablers are, and then we look at what the challenges are. The government targets, basically an aggressive target from the government of 60 gigawatts by 2022 and 140 gigawatts by 2030. Plus, this coupled with this, the renewable purchase obligation, which is 10.5% non-solar by 2025. Is going to augur well for the wind energy sector. Stabilizing tariffs, what we saw in the previous slide, the tariffs have now stabilized to somewhere about between 3.4 to 3.6 euro cents per unit, which is then is allowing for a sustainable growth of the wind industry, and there is independence from government subsidies now. Technology advancements, basically we're looking at increased capacity or capacity ratings of turbines. So the turbines that are currently being used in India, and we will see this further in the further slides as well, is between somewhere between 2 to 2.5 megawatt turbines. And now OEMs are exploring, or in the process of developing 3 megawatt plus turbines also. This will also lead to better land utilization, better efficiency of the machines, and will also drive repowering focus. Besides, offshore is also to bring in new technology from which will be in 4 megawatt plus turbines that offshore technologies will look at. Increasing investments, again, this is we'll be looking at the total investment in RE or renewable energy reached about 38 billion euros since 2014. The FDI has been about 3.8 billion euros between FY16 and FY19. Besides an expected investment of about $500 billion or maybe 450 billion euros is expected until 2030 on the renewable energy side. The key challenges from a wind energy perspective in India is land acquisition. I mean, we are talking about it's a very prolonged process, which has a conflict between states as well. I mean, the central government as well as state governments. Besides considering the vast span of solar farms, it is required that you have to basically sit and negotiate with a lot of different land owners for different turbine sets. So these are certain challenges from a land acquisition perspective. Evacuation infrastructure perspective, building the evacuation infrastructure, again, this requires a lot of right of way issues come into picture. But however, PGCIL or the central transmission utility along with its state transmission companies are proactively working on substation setup in key identified wind specific zones. Besides delay in offshore, I mean, there is a delay in the completion of survey, policy framework and auctions. This is expected to impact offshore project kickoff and installations. Low tariffs impacting profitability. With the reverse auctions, the government though has been able to bring prices at a very, very competitive rate, but this is also impacting the IPPs and OEMs from a perspective that any delays in project completion is going to then impact their financials directly and hit them very hard in terms of financial stress. We'll quickly take a look at the offshore wind energy policy as well. MNRE or the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy has set a target for offshore wind of 30 gigawatts by 2030. The key zones that have been identified is in Gujarat, wherein the wind speeds at 120 meter hub height is about 6.8 to 7 meters per second, and second is in Tamil Nadu, wherein the wind speeds are about 8 to 8.3 meters per second at 120 meters hub height. The machines or the wind turbine generators that the OEMs are considering for the first project is going to be about 4 megawatt in capacity. So the wind energy policy basically was introduced in in 2015. The resource assessment began in 2017, wherein NIWE or National and FO, which is the FOWPI, started exploring opportunities or along the coastlines of Gujarat and Tamil Nadu. MNRE further announced that the mid to long term targets was 5 gigawatts by 2022. This is something that is not going to be achieved considering that we are still to tender the first document itself, or release the tender for the first document, and 30 gigawatt by 2030. The expression of interest was released in 2019, and the auctions for the first 1 gigawatt offshore project in Tamil Nadu is anticipated somewhere in end of 2020 or early 2021. A quick look at what the project status here is. As I mentioned earlier, the mean speeds of wind at 120 meter height is about 6.8 to 7 meters per second. And we're looking at an area available of about 17,000 plus square kilometers, with a distance from shore being anywhere between 9 to 45 kilometers. The tariff expectation that MNRE had was somewhere in about 5 to 7.5 euro cents per kilowatt hour, while IPPs or independent power producers were expecting somewhere between 11 to 15 euro cents per kilowatt hour. This is where the deadlock now lies, and the IPPs are basically trying to negotiate with MNRE for basically trying to get some sort of a viability gap funding, so that the required prices or the required rates can be achieved. From a wind technology or a wind turbine generator technology perspective and localization levels, India by far has a very well established supply chain or value chain for wind turbine generator manufacturing, which includes blades, nacelles, castings, forgings, gearboxes, and other equipment as well. The key OEMs in India are Suzlon, Gamesa, Vestas, Region, Inox, we've got GE, and then Enercon is also planning to enter India. Is already entered India, but they will be launching their first machines somewhere in this financial year. The key, like we discussed, like I mentioned earlier as well, the key turbine, the popular turbine segments in India are between 2 to 2.5 megawatts, whereas OEMs are now in the process of developing higher capacity wind turbine generators between 3 to 4 megawatts. This is considering that the localization levels also in India are very high, wherein if you look at Suzlon, it is greater than 95%. Siemens Gamesa and Inox Wind are between 80 to 90%, and Vestas and GE are between 70 to 80% localization levels. MNRE is basically expecting to bring a policy targeting at increasing the RE sector localization levels to beyond 90% by in this financial year. High capacity wind turbine generators basically will drive opportunities for A, repowering, and B, from an offshore wind perspective. Besides, also there will be new requirements coming up from a component localization perspective for the higher capacity wind turbines. Export potential is an emerging opportunity again, wherein we see an export potential of about 300 to 400 megawatts in FY22 versus 700 to 800 megawatt of wind turbine generator export potential by 2024-25. Largely, if we look at some of the OEMs, for example, Nordex basically set up India as an export hub, and are transporting and are basically shipping out finished products to Latin America. Siemens Gamesa again is developing a 3.2 megawatt turbine for supplying it into Sri Lanka for their projects in Sri Lanka. Enercon is again re-entered in India and is developing local manufacturing base, basically from an export opportunities on the radar. So wind turbine generator exports from India is also going to lead to additional opportunities for component manufacturing as well. Domestic, so I'll quickly run through the business opportunities that we see. So we're looking at basically an installed capacity of 37 gigawatts, which is the status quo now, of which 19 19,000 wind turbines are less than 1 megawatt, which are installed in class 1 sites, and then there are about 9,000 wind. This also includes 9,000 wind turbines which are less than 500 gigawatt kilowatt rating, which are presently installed. The plan is to basically have 60 gigawatt of wind turbine capacity by 2022 and 140 gigawatts by 2030, which roughly translates to about 10 to 12 gigawatts per annum until 2030. From a manufacturing competence perspective, India today has about 13 gigawatts, which also includes gearboxes of wind turbine generator capacity, and the ratings up to 2.5 megawatt. Amongst the largest and India is amongst the largest wind turbine generator manufacturer globally. OEMs, from a plants perspective, OEMs are now focusing to develop higher capacity wind turbines, which between 3 to 4 megawatts, and export capabilities. This is a quick recap from what we just looked at in the earlier slides. Wind turbine and components, including hubs, nacelles, gearboxes, to etc. to US and European regions. From an export capability, this is something that is happening now. Plans are, like we saw earlier, 0.8 gigawatt by 2025, and then 1 to 1.5 gigawatts by 2030. The opportunities: there is an immediate potential for repowering wind turbine generators with capacity of less than 500 kilowatt rating, which is what we saw earlier as in the status quo of the installed capacity, wherein about 9,000 wind turbine generators currently installed are less than 500 kilowatts. Now these can be replaced with higher capacity, maybe 2.5, 3 megawatt turbines, which will significantly increase the installed capacity in the same space available. Local components development for high capacity wind turbines, and which includes castings and forgings, and also offshore wind turbine generators, which will also include additional requirements like for electrical equipment like subsea cables, which can again be an opportunity from a local manufacturing perspective. Also looking at India, developing India as an export hub, which is like de-risking China. If you look at the recent news, a lot of manufacturers have been, when the COVID-19 broke out, have been looking at shifting their manufacturing. I mean, using their existing India manufacturing for their export business, which was earlier being handled by China. So MNRE has also taken a deep look at this and is now considering 50 to 500 acres of land parcels near ports for setting up RE manufacturing as well as export service hubs, which will again drive localization demand. Solar energy sector, this has witnessed a very accelerated growth between 2014 and 2020. It has grown by more than 10 times, from 2.6 gigawatts in 2014 to 35 gigawatts in 2020. Under the NDA regime one, basically the average auctions that happened was between 5 to 6 gigawatts, and then the average capacity addition was about 4.8 gigawatts. India recently introduced in 2018 a safeguard duty was introduced. This was basically to safeguard Indian manufacturers from the influx of a lot of imports that was happening from China and from Malaysia. But this adversely impacted the capacity addition, which then fell down from 9.4 gigawatts in 2017-18 to about 6.5 gigawatts in 2019-2020. Additionally, there are about 23 gigawatts of solar projects under various stages of implementation, and about 30 gigawatts which is under bidding, which will take the total capacity roughly by 2022. We can expect the capacity to at least reach about 75 to 80 gigawatts. The average prices, if you look at the solar auctions, have always been the solar bids have always been on a reverse auction basis, and the prices have significantly dropped from the 2016 levels, which was roughly at about 5.9 euro cents per unit, to about 3.1 to 3.3 euro cents per unit in FY19. This is largely stabilized now. Growth drivers, challenges from a solar industry perspective. Again, aggressive targets from the government, which is 100 gigawatts by 2022 and 300 gigawatts by 2030. Solar renewable purchase obligation targets of about 10.5% by 2022, which is auguring well with the solar energy sector. Schemes and initiatives, the PM Kusum, or we call it the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Urja Suraksha Evam Uttan Mahabhiyan, which is focused on solar penetration in the rural areas. This is targeting about 2.8 million solar pumps and 10 gigawatts of off-grid solar power in rural areas by 2022, with an estimated investment of about 12 billion euros for incentives, etc., and the towards building this kind of capacity. And then there is SRISTI, which is sustainable rooftop implementation, wherein 4 gigawatts of residential rooftop addition and 18 gigawatt of addition via discoms is expected by 2022. This is going to require central government investment of about 10 billion euros. Floating solar and hybrid solutions. Floating solar about 120 gigawatts was a tender was concluded at about 4.1 euro cents per kilowatt hour. The total potential in India is about 300 gigawatts, and this is considering only 10 to 15% of water body coverage in India. Besides this, there are potential hybrid solutions which include round-the-clock power, increasing investments. Again, when we look at this is similar we've talked about earlier as well, so I will be skipping this. Procurement of land, availability of contiguous land at competitive prices. So while we're talking about large solar farms, we're really looking at huge spans of land requirement, and availability of all of this land in a single location becomes a challenge, which is where this takes time. Besides, also distribution companies, when they are looking to sign PPAs with solar producers, they are looking at the land being secured by them prior to signing the PPA. Clarity on policy. I mean, from a consistency perspective, the domestic content regulation for solar cell and solar module developers, this has been changing, and there have been frequent requirements of MNRE to come in and clarify on this, and limited fund allocation for select solar sectors, like for example rooftop and off-grid solar. Local value chain. The Indian local value chain from a domestic, from a solar PV perspective, it is quite so weak, and there is high dependence on imports. Of approximately 85% of the solar power requirement, the solar PV cells, PV module requirements are largely met through imports. China is really amongst the major contributors, with more than about 80% of import contribution coming in from China. Low tariffs, again, impacting profitability. Like we mentioned that the competitive bidding is really pushing IPPs to really bid to the lowest possible level, and then they would really need to ensure that the projects are executed on time, so that they are not financially stressed during the operational stages. Going further, looking at the PV value chain, like I mentioned earlier, from a upstream perspective, when I look at it, we're talking about silicon feedstock and as well as ingots and wafers. There is negligible existence in India. It is quite capital intensive and industry, wherein the requirements are of long-term contracts. 60% of PV manufacturers are based in southern India, specifically in Andhra Pradesh and in Karnataka. When I look at PV cells, PV modules, this is where a large chunk of or a large set of private Indian players are dominating, wherein there is about 3 gigawatt of PV cells and 8 to 10 gigawatt of modules capacity in India. Less than 50% of capacity utilization, though, has been observed. This is the government is looking at pushing local manufacturing to drive capacity addition. This is through safeguard duty that I mentioned earlier as well on cells and modules import from China and Malaysia. This was introduced in 2018, and then SECI's manufacturing linked solar tenders. So basically linking solar projects with setting up of new local manufacturing facility as well. Besides 2022 capacity, about 8 to 10 gigawatt of PV cells and 15 gigawatt of PV modules is what is expected the capacity in India would be. Greater than 85% import dependence due to is largely, and the low capacity utilization what we see is largely due to price and quality factors. 80% imports coming in from China. Business opportunities, we are looking at it from two perspectives. One is from a solar PV perspective, which includes utility scale solar as well as rooftop solar, and then we look at it from a perspective of solar pumps. So like what we discussed earlier from solar PV perspective, there is about 22 to 25 gigawatt per annum of solar PV requirements until 2030 that is going to come up. While what we saw was that the manufacturing capacity for solar PV modules, solar PV cells is about 3 gigawatts, and solar PV modules is about 8 to 10 gigawatts. So there is a significant opportunity for local component demand serving opportunity, while also exploring India as an export hub. This is again from de-risking China, wherein we are talking about PV cells, PV panels or PV modules, solar inverters, storage solutions. Also, MNRE, like I mentioned earlier, is keen on identifying land parcels somewhere near to ports from an RE manufacturing and export hub perspective. Power plant developers can also focus on group captive and open access to ensure sustainable business models. This is something that a lot of rooftop solar companies have now started doing, is they've started focusing on open access more than just looking at it from a rooftop solar perspective. Besides from a solar pumps perspective, when we look at it, less than 200,000 solar pumps have been installed as on date, as against a target of 2.8 million pumps by 2022, which is roughly about 7%. So there is a good 93% of solar pump installation, potential that is there. Wherein from an opportunity perspective, what one can look at is integrated manufacturing of solar panels and pumps. Preferred entry is via partnering, local partnering, considering the penetration requirements in rural areas here. Some success factors from a technology perspective we've looked at. When we look at from a PV equipment perspective, it has to be as much integrated a value chain as possible, so to ensure that international investors or MNCs are able to succeed in this business. So it largely should start from the PV cells, or even if possible PV wafers, going right up to the system integration. This will also allow for competitive cost per watt of the solar modules that are being offered. Now my colleague Abhishek will take you through the India alternate fuels and landscape and opportunities. Over to you, Abhishek.
Thank you, Anup. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and thank you for joining this webinar. So the key objective for the next 10 to 15 minutes or so is to take you through, one, the India alternative fuel landscape, as well as the opportunities pertaining to the same basis various government and private initiatives. Right. The key India alternative fuel can be divided into two key segments, one being biofuels and the other being hydrogen. When we talk about biofuels, we are primarily talking about biomass sourced from agro, cattle, as well as municipal waste, which is refined into biofuels, like first-gen biofuels like biodiesel, bioethanol, biogas, which is further processed to produce the second-gen biofuels called advanced biofuels like biomethanol, biohydrogen, and compressed biogas. Now, biogas and compressed biogas are the key focus sectors which we will be taking you through in our presentation. On the other hand, hydrogen is primarily sourced from oil refineries, fertilizer companies, and chlor-alkali companies in India. Now, the utilization or initiatives towards hydrogen in India is primarily towards hydrogen CNG and fuel cells. Now, under the fuel cells, the key application segments that is a focus is the backup power sector, and as well as the commercial vehicle mobility solutions. Now we would like to deep dive into the biofuel segments. Now, before talking in detail, going into detail about biofuels, I would like to give you a brief perspective about the India Biomass Power. This is to keep in line with the overall presentation focus on the power sector. India has a total estimated potential biomass power generation potential of nearly 25 gigawatts, with the current installed capacity standing at 10 gigawatts. Now, the key states in biomass power production is Maharashtra, Uttar Pradesh, and Karnataka. Globally, India stands second when considered in biomass-based power production. To deep dive into a biofuel sector, when we talk about the first gen biofuel, that is the biogas, it is primarily produced via anaerobic digestion of the biomass, and India has an estimated potential of 62 million metric tons per annum, with the key specification being methane value of 55 to 60%. Primarily, water scrubbing technology and pressure swing adsorption technology is used in India for further cleaning of this biogas to produce compressed biogas. Compressed biogas is characterized by a methane percentage of minimum 90%. The total estimated methane CBG potential of India is 32 million metric tons per annum, whereas the current CBG output is only 18,000 metric tons per annum. Now, a brief view on the feedstock that is used for these biofuels, agro sector. Agricultural waste. India has a total agricultural waste capacity of 234 million metric tons per annum, which is an equivalent of around 14 million metric tons per annum of biogas potential. So what we can see over here is 23% of the total India biogas potential can be attributed purely to agricultural waste, making it a key feedstock source, high potential feedstock source. We would like to take you through certain government initiatives in terms of biofuels. Now, biofuel policy in 2018 was primarily drafted to provide gap funding subsidies and grants to promote biofuels, mainly the advanced biofuels that I had earlier talked about. Now, BPGTP is the biogas-based power generation thermal application. This was initiated to set up 2 to 250 kilowatt small biogas power plants. As of December 2019, 316 biogas projects have been set up with a cumulative generation capacity of 7.2 megawatts and a biogas generation capacity of nearly 70,000 meter cube per day. Now, under the new National Biogas and Organic Manure Program, the target was of establishing 255,000 small-scale biogas plants, the main objective of which was to meet the rural fuel requirements. Of this, currently, as of December 2019, 62,000 biogas plants have been set up, which is only 24% of the initial target. Under the Ministry of Petroleum, the Sustainable Alternative Toward Affordable Transportation program has also been set up, which the main aim is to promote the production of compressed biogas in India. The government of India has set an annual target of 15 metric tons per annum production by 2025. Whereas, like earlier mentioned, the current production is only 18,000 metric tons, which is around 0.1% of the target. The key challenges that we can foresee in the biofuel industry is one, from the feedstock procurement, and two, from the supply and commercial viability. Now, when we talk about feedstock challenges, a high share of small and marginal farmers, and as well as sourcing challenges arising from short duration between the crop cycling patterns, that is 10 to 15 days, makes agro waste collection highly challenging. Now, high volumes of agro waste leads to high cost of storage and logistics of feedstock. This is another challenge in terms of feedstock procurement. While CBG supply in the form of cylinders is commercially viable within a 200-kilometer radius from the plants. Suppose that it affects the total cylinder landed costs. This is another key challenge. The main challenge for biomass power in India that we had previously mentioned is the competition from other RE sources like solar and wind, because the prices from these is as low as 0.03 to 0.04 euros per unit. The key opportunities that we foresee in the biofuel industry is divided into three major segments. That's compressed biogas, rural fuel supply, methanol, and an overview of the power generation. Now, on the compressed biogas, as we have already mentioned, the target is 15 million metric tons by 2025, whereas only 0.1% has been achieved. So, leaving behind a huge potential for capacity addition. Now, the rural fuel supply, the government of India had targeted to reach 255,000 smaller plants, whereas only 24% of this has been achieved. So that in tandem with the compressed biogas can provide and establish a direct feedstock supply chain from all the rural farmers. Methanol utilization, methanol used in India for processes consumption is around 2 myometric tons per annum, whereas 87% of that demand is primarily imported. So the government pushed towards biomethanol and under the biofuel policy in 2018 will help bridge this huge domestic supply gap. Biopower, additionally, there is ongoing R&D on methanol and biomethanol based fuel cells, which can also be a good potential applications. Biopower in India has a very low potential on account that the total RE mix for biofuel is around 10 gigawatt, which has already been achieved, and this mix isn't changing from either 2020 to 2030. I would like to give you a brief snapshot of a German company, Verbio India, which is a key example for the MIIM initiative in India. Now, Verbio set up their organization in Indian subsidiary in 2016, and had plans of setting up biogas production from paddy straw. Their first plant, which is under construction and is expected to be operational in Q1 2021. Upon commissioning, I would like to highlight that it will be India's largest biofuel plant with a bio-CNG or CBG capacity of 33.2 tons per day and an organic manure capacity of 350 tons per day. And the first plant is being set at an investment of 20 million euros. Additionally, the Verbio also has plans for setting up 5 new plants at a total investment of 100 million euros to target the automotive and industrial CNG applications. Now, I would like to deep dive into the hydrogen and fuel cell sectors in India. Hydrogen, as we previously mentioned, hydrogen is primarily produced from chlor-alkali oil refineries and fertilizer companies. Now, wherein chlor-alkali is the main supplier of mercantile hydrogen, as hydrogen is produced as a byproduct of caustic soda production, and hence it can also be considered as a green source for the same. Hydrogen production from chlor-alkali was estimated at 99.1 million meter cubes in 2019, with key companies like Grasim Industries, Punjab Alkali, Century Rayon, DCM Limited, amongst others. Now, gas companies are key enablers of hydrogen supply chain in India. Hydrogen purity levels of greater than 99.5% is possible, with the supply primarily being in the form of cylinders and cascades at the pressure of 200 bar. The pressure level that I have mentioned at 200 bar is primarily attributed to the gas cylinder rules 2016. Commercially viable hydrogen cylinders is also at a radius of 200 kilometers from the plant. Here I would like to talk about a few key India hydrogen initiatives. Now, India hydrogen initiatives can primarily be attributed to 1, production of hydrogen, 2, hydrogen CNG for buses, and 3 is the fuel cells. Now, when I talk about hydrogen CNG, that is hydrogen enriched CNG. which is a pilot project which is being done by IOCL in tandem with Delhi Transport Corporation. Implemented trials are on 50 commercial buses. Now, fuel cell development in India, the key focuses are deployment for automotive buses and stationary backup power for the telecom sector applications. Key fuel cell industry stakeholders in India are primarily the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, supported by other government departments like the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas and Department of Science and Technology, amongst others. Additionally, R&D activities are conducted by various educational institutions and R&D centers supported by pilot implementation by various public sector and private sector companies. In this chart, what we would like to bring to notice is the government initiatives towards fuel cell development. Primarily mission mode projects, wherein consortiums consisting of R&D laboratories, academic institutions, and industries are proposed for development of fuel cell systems using different technologies like proton exchange membrane, phosphoric acid fuel cell systems, solid oxide fuel cell systems at a total outlay of 80.2 euros. The second stage following the mission mode projects is research and development projects, wherein the key objective is laboratory demonstration of critical system and subsystems, preferably with innovative approaches at the total outlay of 10 euros. Finally, scope for research projects with the aim being to carry out basic fundamental research on different aspects of any fuel cell system other than the ones previously mentioned, that is PEM, EAFC, and SOFC, also has been set up at an outlay of 10 euros. Local value chain in India for fuel cells is primarily constitutes of membrane electric assembly, stacks, and bipolar plates. Fuel cell startups like Log9 Materials based out of Bangalore and LCS Energy based out of Chennai are involved in the development of fuel cell stacks, wherein Log9 are primarily targeting aluminum based fuel cells and LCS targeting a tubular PEMFC stack. Fuel cells in India is a direct competition to low kVA DG segments, which is less than 75 kVA segment. Here we have tried to give a snapshot of the Indian DG set industry. Indian DG set volume scales reached nearly 120,000 units in FY19. 55% of the DG market in 2018 was from low kVA segment, that is the below 75 kVA. While the key focus of the application for the same was the telecom sector. This in turn points the high potential of fuel cell deployment in the telecom sector, especially with the telecom tower operator strategy to go diesel free. Key fuel cell opportunities in India are from telecom towers, data centers, and commercial vehicles, buses. Telecom towers sector is expected to grow by 2.5% till 2025 to reach 546,000 towers, which is mainly being driven by network updates and rollout of data technology like 5G. This is to meet increasing data consumption demand and subscriber base and low latency requirements. Data center outsourcing market is expected to grow by 25% to reach 4.6 billion euros in 2025, and which is mainly driven by the government push towards digital economy, migration to cloud-based business operations, and utilization of big data and IoT solutions. Commercial vehicle segment, which on the other hand has been severely impacted by underlying cyclical and structural factors, further aggravated by the COVID-19 impact, which has led to a total sales decline to nearly 72,000 from 72,000 in 2020 from 101,000 in 2019. This, however, is expected to reach to steady growth of 5% till 2025 to reach a total of 90,000 units. Over here, we have tried to give a brief snapshot of a pilot project case that was conducted by USCBA, which is the US Trade and Development Agency, in 2014 and 17 with IDS Cellular. The prime objective being a pilot project for clean energy in the telecom tower sector. The technology used was solar hybrid methanol-based fuel cell system, with the key fuel cells specs being 2.5 to 5 kilowatt systems, having a tank capacity of 225 liters. Sites were primarily operated for 25 weeks, having real-time web-based monitoring, and the key maintenance that was carried out was air intake cleaning of both fuel cell and the reformer. PV maintenance of planal cleaning every 5 to 6 days was conducted. The major challenges that were faced was the lack of technical expertise, unplanned site load increases, and contingencies on account of fuel supply arising from single supplier. The key results or observation that we could foresee from this case was that the fuel cells utilization was over 60% during the time of the pilot. The solar PV cells was 20 to 30%, whereas the DG cells was 10 to 15%. Barring situations in which the fuel cells were under maintenance or under breakdown, where the DG sets implementation, DG sets percentage rose. Now, the key objectives that from the the pilot case, having like emission reduction, has been met with a CO2 reduction of nearly 30%, and the other emissions like NOx, nitrous oxide, carbon monoxide, and particulate matter of greater than 95%. Now, methanol consumption. Now, the key pilot project findings and takeaways that we could get was reduction in diesel utilization. First, what we could see, there was a total fuel cell contribution of 60% and 23% towards the total power consumption. What the key takeaway for us is the technical and operational feasibility of a fuel cell solar PV system has been established, leading to a reduction in diesel uses. This is in line with the diesel-free target of different telecom tower operators. Reduction in CO2 emissions, as per we can already see from the previous slide, there is significant reduction in all emissions. So the key objective of the pilot of clean energy from telecom towers has already been achieved, making it a viable solution for diesel-free operation. The key challenges that we could see is that the high methanol cost, consumption of fuel, 62% of methanol, was actually 65% higher than expected, and high cost of methanol resulted in an average high per unit cost of 1.3 euros. What we can key takeaway for us over here is the biofuels, including biomethanol. Government of India push, as we had mentioned in the biofuel segment, can provide for lowering the methanol cost required for running of these fuel cells. And fuel cell maintenance was the key segment in which the lack of technical expertise led to the high lead times for repair, hence the use of DG sites. Now, ongoing research and on fuel cells, as well as from the government and private sector, as well as Government of India push towards fuel cell adoption, will definitely improve the total technical expertise. So that's it for my segment.
Thank you, Abhishek. Thank you, Anup, for your presentations. I may like to invite Ms. Ursula Hoffmann she is a senior consultant from Roedl&Partner. So Ursula, I'm just making you presenter right now. So you can share your screen and start your presentation.
Yes, thanks, Ketan, for handing it over to me. I hope you can all see my presentation now.
Yes.
First of all, great. First of all, a warm welcome to all our participants today on behalf of Roedl&Partner, and also from my side, a big thank you to the Embassy of India and to the Indo-German Energy Forum for organizing this webinar today. I think it is very important to regain the focus on the renewable energy sector, especially in these difficult times. Actually, it's also quite interesting to see how the climate and the nature develop, especially in big cities like Mumbai during this lockdown. So I'm very happy to be part today of this interesting discussion. Let me just quickly introduce Roedl&Partner and myself. Roedl&Partner is a professional management and accounting consulting firm with focus in tax, legal, financial, and business process outsourcing. Our head office is in Nuremberg in Germany, and we have our offices in India, in Delhi, Ahmedabad, Mumbai, Pune, Bangalore, and Chennai. Also, we are the legal and tax advisory partner for Make in India Mittelstand. My name is Ursula Hoffmann. I'm a German qualified lawyer, and I work as a senior consultant for Roedl&Partner, and I'm taking care a little bit of the renewable energy sector, so that's why I'm here today. Today's webinar is about giving you an overview of the legal framework for investing in renewables in India. And I truly hope that with this knowledge, after my presentation, you're encouraged and you're very well prepared for starting your investment or even expanding your investment in India. So let me start right away with the market entry options. I want to just say one thing in advance. Your market entry strategy should always be based on your business model. And based on your business model, you can then say, okay, whatever suits me better. Today's focus shall be on representations and the private limited company. So if you're interested in opening a representation in India, you generally have three options: the liaison office, the project office, and the branch office. The liaison office is a legal structure that is suitable usually for foreign companies that are looking to set up just a temporary office in India to liaison their business with Indian customers. The role of the liaison office is really more like a communication channel between the parent company and India, and it solely acts as a representation by, for example, promoting the products of the parent company in India. The important part of a liaison office is that it's not allowed for the liaison office to undertake any commercial, trading, or industrial activity, directly or indirectly. And that leads to the fact that the liaison office is not allowed to gain any own income in India. It is really just meant as a representation. In case the liaison office acts beyond the permitted activities, it will constitute a permanent establishment, which would lead to the fact that all profits which are allocated to the Indian business would be taxed with a withholding tax rate of 43%. Coming to the branch office is not a separate legal entity, but it is allowed to carry out more economic activities, however, also not manufacturing activities. A branch office is comparable to what we know in Germany as Zweigniederlassung. Further important to know about the branch office, it is always considered to be a permanent establishment, again, with the consequence of that very high tax rate. A project office, on the other hand, serves only the purpose of implementing a project in India, which means the project office is completely financed exclusively by the parent company, and therefore also all the corresponding agreements for that project have to be submitted to the RBI for approval. A project office is not as such seen as a permanent establishment, but it depends a little bit on the type and the duration of the activities which are carried out in India. Usually it also leads to a permanent establishment and again to a high tax rate. So that's why we usually see that companies only prefer project office in case of a very just one-time big assembly project, for example, where it just simply doesn't make sense to establish a wholly owned subsidiary. Having said that, to the private limited company, this is the most frequently form of companies chosen in India, and in particular it became more and more interesting due to the eased out incorporation process. In fact, we at Roedl&Partner have actually developed a very smooth incorporation process for our clients, which guarantees you to have a fully operational, wholly owned subsidiary within only 3 months. The private limited company is comparable to a German GmbH. However, there are structural differences. I don't want to go too much into detail here, but let me just highlight a few aspects. A private limited company has to have minimum 2 shareholders. These shareholders in India are very different to the shareholders as we know it in Germany, because they are more like silent promoters or silent investors. So in fact, they don't have a lot of influence in the business of the company. The business of the company and the management of the company is completely carried out by the board of the directors. The board of directors is a collective management body of the company, which is on the one hand the executive body of the company and is therefore equivalent to what we know in Germany as a Geschäftsführer. But on the other hand, also it is performing controlling functions and therefore acts more as a supervisory and advisory board as well. A board of directors has to have minimum 2 directors, from which one of them is a resident director, means he's a resident in India. It is not required for a company to appoint a managing director unless the company has more than 100 million rupee turnover. Just to say a few sentences to the tax rate, the current tax rate, the income of a private limited company with less than 4 billion rupee turnover is currently taxed at an effective tax rate of approximately 29%. And interesting to know, for newly incorporated manufacturing companies, these are only taxed at an effective tax rate of 17%. So you can clearly see there the driven government by the Make in India program. Further, with this year's budget, the dividend distribution tax got abolished with effect of 1st April. And I think this makes a lot of shareholders currently very happy. Quickly, let me just say a few sentences to joint ventures, because we always hear that joint ventures should be avoided in India. And we clearly do not agree with this statement, because we just think it is very important to see who is your joint venture partner, that you actually meet these people, that you have a common ground, and then you can clearly go ahead with a joint venture. However, the whole structure should be given in the shareholders agreement. So a shareholders agreement would be very important, where you just mention all exit mechanisms, controlling mechanisms, the shareholding pattern, everything regarding brands and licenses. This is important just to avoid future disputes. Also, what we think is very important is to live your joint venture. We see it very often that German companies have a joint venture company in India and they completely forget about it and they don't live with it. So we advise always, if you go for a joint venture, do it, but live with it. Now coming to the tendering process in India. In this chapter, I want to give you a general overview about the process and perhaps what we think is important to know about. So in general, the public and the private procurements are very different in nature, and each has contrasting objectives and goals. In fact, public entities, they have fixed budgets, they have to follow regulations set by the central government, like the general financial rules. Furthermore, transparency is a very important feature of public procurements, as the procuring entities are accountable to the government with how public funds are actually being spent. That's why these central government rules, like the general financial rules, are pointing out transparency, competition, fairness, and they are aimed to eliminate disputes in procurement. Private entities, on the other hand, they fund themselves, and thus they don't have to justify themselves as much as public authorities do. So this is a very important difference between public and private tenders. Private tenders, they don't have to follow a specific law, a specific procedure. However, often still because of transparency, there are fixed guidelines for request of proposal or request of quotation, which are usually more for like internal compliances, because the company might have anti-corruption and bribery policy, for example. Otherwise, it's important to know that India has introduced the central e-tender and e-procurement platform, which allows a lot of transparency and goes again in direction of e-governments. Further, Anup already mentioned a lot regarding the reserve bidding mechanism, so I will not go further into detail here. So usually the public procurement award goes the entire project as a turnkey work to a single bidder, but I just want to let you know here, this is not the end of the story. It is very important for me to let you know that still for component manufacturers, for suppliers, or even for service companies, there's still a lot of potential to being part of this tender as a subcontractor. So tenders shouldn't be only interesting for big project companies or for big development companies, no, also for really even small component manufacturers. Coming now a little bit to winning strategies, a very important aspect that we think has to happen especially in the renewable energy sectors, is to be cost competitive. So you know probably, and also after Anup's presentation, that especially in the solar market right now, Chinese products are very dominant because simply cheap. China is for their highly developed technology, which might just needs to be a little bit adapted to the Indian market to sustain the Indian market. So here it is important to first make that adaptation to the Indian market, and then with that step being also perhaps a bit more cost competitive. Another aspect that I want to highlight is that we see very often that public tenders usually go to companies which have a legal establishment in India, simply because of the reason this gives a little bit more of a trust factor. In this experience very drastically with one client, which always just got into project as a subcontractor, but with establishing their own legal presence in India, they could win all the tenders for themselves directly. This again reflects a little bit the policy of India towards Make in India. Now, licenses and permits. Here's to say that India is known for having a lot of several different kind of approvals, clearances, NOCs, permits, licenses. Even though the trend in India goes towards e-governments, which means you can obtain a lot of them right now online, however, you still have that mass of different kind of clearances which you have to take for your business. So here it is important to see what is actually applicable to your activities, to your business. This also depends where you're carrying out your business. There are state-wise differences in the clearances and in the approvals. So here it is important for you to have a local partner who can help you to get all these NOCs, clearances, approvals, licenses, registrations, and so you are compliant with all the local laws and regulations. This problem of this pool of approvals and licenses was actually acknowledged by a few states, and that's why they have introduced, especially for the renewable energy sector, a so-called nodal officer or nodal agency, which can be approached as a one-stop shop solution. However, here it depends on each state will be by the service of the nodal agency. For example, in Madhya Pradesh, for implementing various programs and policies for the renewable energy sector. In fact, the nodal agent is authorized agency to verify compliances for standardization of quality and also to give registrations for the renewable energy system. Further, another problem usually comes up with land acquisition. Anup has touched this topic as well. However, I just want to mention here now, this problem was seen also by the ministry, and that's why they want to introduce the government will take acquisition tremendously. From the company. Now, coming to an end of my presentation, I give you an overview of the way forward for industry. Again, is very important and very big right now. Investors, we clearly so we definitely have a feeling if any incentives will come up then on that aspect. Further, especially due to this whole coronavirus crisis, we have the feeling the government has developed very mixed feelings regarding imports from China. So definitely also in the solar sector, there will be a shift towards more German or European companies which have their a big advantage now, because we think that the government in general wants to be much more independent from imports, especially from China. So that's from my side. Thank you so much for participating in today's webinar. We are really excited to be your partner with you on your renewable energy venture in India. And in case you have any questions regarding your investment in India, please feel free to reach out to us even after this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ursula, for your presentation. Now we are handing it over to Director of IGEF, Mr. Tobias Winter, Dr. Tobias Winter. So, Mr. Winter, I have shared the presentation rights to you. You can unmute yourself and start the presentation.
Yeah, thank you to the Embassy of India. Thank you, everybody. You are you listening? Yeah. Once again, welcome to everyone. I'll just give a quick session. Let's make it fast so that will be the time for some additional questions. You're all aware of this Indo-German Energy Forum established in 2006 as a platform for both of our governments. I'll just skip through the next slides. Our stakeholders, associations we are working together with, and you are well aware of around 1,800 German companies, already most of them members of the Indo-German Chamber of Commerce, here established in India. Recently, in the last 5 years, companies rejoined or joined the Indian market. I see lots of participants from those companies participating in the seminar. There's also more German suppliers and more German companies entering the market. You might have heard of WPD. Quick overview on energy capacity development, power development in India. Anup, you made a really nice presentation, but what we would like to point out that India's capacity development is really a doubling of capacity until the year 2030. There's still plans on increasing coal. There's still a large captive market for coal, but yes, there's no doubt that the main capacities being added in the future are coming from renewables. All of us know the goal of 175 by 22. So yes, will this be achieved till 22? Yes or no? I think this is not the question. If it's not going to be achieved in 22, then it will be 23 or 24. The way forward is clear. Government of India now also added goals for battery deployment, 34 gigawatts at least until 2030. This is an image which most of Germans might not know too much, but our Indian friends know it very well. I don't know if we can have a small poll or question. What do you think is the capacity of all diesel gensets installed in India? Is there any idea? So we saw from Anup that there is an overall capacity of around 340 gigawatt of power capacity in India, but do you have any idea of what is the power capacity of diesel gensets in India? Well, as you can see on top of the growth for this market segment, so you get an idea. We are talking about 120, and this must be a huge market as renewables are coming down, centralized renewables. When we are seeing in the different states, and I have put out here the highest tariffs you might want to compete with your diesel like renewable energy supply. So interesting, while residential tariffs in India are the lowest and industrial and commercial tariffs are quite high. And yes, I have here selected the highest tariffs of India, but this might be the market segments where some German companies might like to enter. No? So with the 14 euro cents per kilowatt hour, that might be an attractive market segment. Maybe rooftop with battery in the state of Maharashtra. There's a stock see the prices throughout the year and study them more profoundly on their website. Price for coal right now in India, including the peak % per kilowatt hour. New PV on the lower end, on the lowest end. For large scale PV is at 3 euro cent per kilowatt hour, and same to wind. That might not be the market segments you would like to compete with. There are very few players in these segments, and the utility power scale about up to gigawatt project sizes. But coming back to the market segment of these 120 gigawatt diesel gensets, there's one thing which is beautiful about India, and I cannot show this enough. This is the generation in India in 2019. And what's amazing about it is that there is hardly any variations throughout the year, significant variations. If you show the same slide from Germany, you see definitely that Jan, Feb, November, December, there is not as much sun as during the summer months. But in India, we have sun. Somewhere in India, the sun is always shining. Everywhere in India, which means they're not looking for long-term storage. The only storage India needs for catering the peak demand at night is a storage which goes with one cycle towards the night. Peak demand is around at 7 o'clock in the evening and at 30 in the evening when everybody turns on the AC, mainly in summertime. So they're not looking for long-term storage. They're looking for a storage application. And Anup, I was really thankful for you showing the round-the-clock development tender of SECI. And I'd like to show this slide to you to kind of like make clear that India now distinguishes in upcoming tenders between different timings of when the power is delivered. So definitely in off-peak time during the day, when the sun is shining and cheap solar is available, Government of India now in the last tender for renewables plus storage was giving the project to with the 3.5 euro cent per kilowatt hour. That is during the day, no? But in the morning, Government of India is willing to pay 8.4 euro cent per kilowatt hour, and in the evening, Government of India is willing to pay 8.4 euro cent per kilowatt hour, and these are tenders 20 years long. So becoming more interesting now is developing, for example, wind projects in places where there might be not maximum output of power generation, but where there might be power generation at the right time. Combining solar with wind and having wind during the peak times might give you a mixed calculation price of maybe 5 or 6 euro cent, and suddenly project sites which earlier for wind would have not made sense do make sense. Definitely battery is also kicking in. I have shown you the slide of recent market entries in India. So Fluence, a joint venture of Siemens and AES, you might have heard of it. They have just deployed the 10 megawatt peak capacity, 10 megawatt hour battery here in Delhi, and we definitely see this market segment upcoming. Further information, yeah, I think the most important magazine, if you want to make yourself known to the power sector in India and get a glimpse, is the Renewable Watch and the Power Line. Then any addresses you can dream of in the power market in India, just purchase one of these Power Line directory and yearbooks, or just get in touch with us. We can definitely also recommend for the renewable sector itself the two consultancy firms which are deeply into the sector, MACOM and Bridge to India. Trade fairs, that's a different topic now in times of Corona. But yes, the government-run RE Invest is happening, is going to happen on a digital platform. Renewable Energy India Expo, the flagship event of the private sector, and the Intersolar, both so far in India are happening. We are going to see how they adapt to the situation and if they are also going digital. But yes, this slide just gives you an impression of the players of the trade fair market here active in India, where your company can position itself. IGEF itself also has lots of events foreseen. I think the presentation will be shared afterwards, so you can just have a look at it. Else, I would like to point out for the private sector, the main contact persons which we consider here is MIIM, Mr. Anup Barapatre, GTAI, Mr. Alex. I think I saw him also in this webinar here. Definitely the German Chamber, and then from the Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy in Germany, there's a program, if you're from the renewable energy space, where you can subscribe yourself and participate in different promotion programs. And yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Winter, for the insightful presentation. Gentlemen, now we are opening for a Q&A session. If you have any questions, please click on raised hand icon you have on the panel, and we will unmute you one by one to take your questions. So anyone has questions, please click on raised hand icon. Yes, so I can see Mr. Sharma has the question. Yes, Aditya, we have unmuted you. You can ask your question.
Sure. Hello, everyone. It has been really an excellent presentation by all the speakers. My question is, does waste to energy qualify to be a renewable energy project? Over.
Thank you.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, Aditya.
Yeah, okay.
We heard your question.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
So, speakers who would like to take up this question? Anup? Tobias? Mr. Winter?
My microphone is unmuted, so I would just say yes, and I would also point out that the new Joint Secretary in the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy in charge of biomass actually comes from the private sector, and this is a big gift. He's really responsive, and any questions, please just get in contact with him also directly.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winter. So, gentlemen, if you have any questions, please click on raised hand icon and we can take up your questions. You can also send us your questions in question, let's say in chat format. Okay, so I don't see any questions coming up right now. So thank you very much, audience, for attending the MIIM webinar. You can definitely contact us on all the contact points shown by presenters. Also, we will send you the contact points later, and we will also definitely share the presentations shared by the the presenters. Yes, presentations will be shared for sure. We have a question coming up. Sorry for that, but we have one question coming up, and that's for you, Mr. Winter. So I'll just where's the, yeah. Can you show slide with the upcoming events? He will. So Mr. Crafton Corino, IGF will share the presentation where the list of upcoming events will be there. So that's not a problem. Is there any questions? Other questions? Okay, I don't see any questions. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you everyone for attending this webinar. Bye bye. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.